Wheel of Time community, and welcome to the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru. I'm Teresa.
And I'm Tim.
And together we're going to walk you through Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. How you doing, Tim?
I'm actually doing pretty well this week. We got a lot of really great news coming across Twitter. Amazon announced that they've greenlighted the Wheel of Time show as a TV series.
Right, yeah.
It's been a good week.
Cool. Before we get started, we just want to remind you that this is a reread, so there will be spoilers. You have been warned. All right, Tim, what are we going to be doing in today's episode?
This week's episode, we travel with Rand and Matt and Thom as they all sail down the river on Bayle Domon's boat. And we catch up with Perrin and Egwene as they meet the traveling people. Chapter 24 is called Flight Down the Arinelle, and the icon is Thom's harp.
Here's a quick summary of Chapter 24 to act as a reminder for those of you who are not reading along with us. Rand is dreaming and finds himself in a maze of staircases and bridges that seem to defy the rules of physics and smell of dank earth and death. He is being chased by a Bayle Domon. He is a bit disoriented and tries not to think of anything specific because he knows that it is dangerous. He pricks his finger on a thorn and it bleeds, but he is distracted from the pain when he realizes that the stones along the pathway are all human skulls. He remembers that you can get out of a maze by always turning in the same direction, so he does and comes face to face with Bayle Domon, who says that Rand is his, the eye of the world will not serve him, and that he will strangle Rand with the corpse of the great serpent. The dream changes, and Rand is surrounded by mirrors. As he stares at his own reflection, Bayle Domon appears, and their images merge and blur until their faces become one face. Rand freaks out and wakes up to discover that his finger is still bleeding from the thorn prick in his dream. Back in the real world, Rand, Matt, and Thom are still on Bayle Domon's boat, traveling toward Whitebridge. Domon is convinced the Trollocs are after him and is pushing his crew extremely hard. Thom worries about mutiny and distracts the crew by telling stories and doing tricks. He also starts to teach Rand and Matt, keeping up their cover story, that the boys are apprentice gleemen, and the crew enjoys watching the lessons. Florin Gelb is in disgrace. The rest of the crew want nothing to do with him, and his hatred of Thom, Matt, and especially Rand grows by the day. So does Matt's paranoia and suspicion of everyone. As they sail down the river, they pass many wonders that Domon explains are relics from the Age of Legends, and says that he's a bit of a collector. Matt is only interested in treasure, but Domon tells him that it's the strange and wondrous things out in the world that make it worth seeing. On the fourth day, Rand has another bout of channeling sickness that leaves him high. This time, literally, and he is recklessly balancing on the top of the mast. Thom has to climb up and get him. He slides down, landing with a flourish, but notices Matt brooding over a ruby-encrusted dagger. Matt confirms that it is from Shadar Logoth, but Mordeth didn't give it to him, so it doesn't count as breaking Moraine's rules. He convinces Rand not to tell anyone, just as Thom walks up to give Rand hell. Rand snaps out of his dazed and confused headspace and realizes that he could have killed himself with his antics and wonders what the hell is wrong with him. Thom brings up the idea of going to Ilion instead of Tar Valon, which Rand immediately refuses, but Thom advises him to keep their options open.
I feel like I say this every episode, but so much happens here.
Oh my gosh, that summary was never ending.
Yeah. And this is, by the way, the chapter where the e-book version of The Eye of the World gets its cover from, with Rand hanging on the mast.
Right, yeah. I like those covers. They're really cool.
Yeah, but I have a soft spot in my heart for
the
old
originals.
one, because it's the original. Even though some of them are completely inaccurate, they're still the original. Whatever. So let's start with the dream.
Okay.
I don't want to spend too much time on it. I've said it before. We've both said it before that I'm not the biggest fan of these early dream sequences because later books it gets much better once we get into the actual dream world. But these dream sequences, they're
not as good. So here's my question: is Rand in the Ways, or like a Dream Shard version of the Ways? Because there's like the maze of bridges and stairs that defy the laws of physics, and the just rundown murkiness and darkness. It just really, really reminds me of the Ways.
You know, I hadn't even considered that until you brought it up. Like,
really?
It could be. I mean, it does sound like a very dark version of the ways, but
Yeah.
For me, it's like an MC Escher staircase. You know, it's like one of those MC Escher things where things don't really start or end. They just kind of and they're all impossible angles. They
Exactly.
Don't
Yeah, totally.
So after I had been reading this for many years, I ran into the show Warehouse 13.
Uh-huh.
And there's an episode of Warehouse 13 where they go into the MC Escher vault.
Right.
And when I saw all the imagery in that, I immediately thought of this scene, actually.
Oh, okay.
So it's that same kind of thing. Where
it's just better lit.
Well, yeah, much better lit because, anyway. So that's kind of what I see going on here. Is
okay.
It could be the ways, but I see it more, I've always seen it more as like an MC Escher painting. Mm-hmm. In this dream, Bayle Domon says, "You are my hound, and if you will not course at my command, I will strangle you with the corpse of the great serpent."
Right.
Now, the great serpent is the symbol of the wheel of time. It's basically the metaphor for time itself.
Okay.
So basically what Bayle Domon is threatening Rand here with is eternal torment once time has ended. So that's pretty much worse than death.
So if you combine the great serpent thing and then the faces turning into one, he's basically telling Rand, "I'll stop the world and melt with you."
Yes, that's exactly what he's saying.
I'm sure that's exactly what Jordan intended.
I'm sure he had that playing in the background as he was writing. Absolutely.
So speaking of the mirror thing, the mirror scene with Rand's face merging into Bayle Domon.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like it's definitely foreshadowing his connection to Ishmael, because we know that, Bayle Domon in this book is Ishmael.
Okay.
And like when you look at their arc throughout the series, like from where they start all the way through Lord of Chaos and then, the end of the book and how connected they become, I feel like that's there's a lot of foreshadowing their connection.
Okay, cool. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a ton of stuff in this chapter that comes back later, and I just feel that that's what this is.
Okay.
Also, the scene reminded me of the scene at the start of book 4 when they're in Tyr. The bubbles of evil scene where Rand has the mirror
shatters.
situation.
There's a whole bunch of Rands. Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's not the same thing, but it reminded me a lot about that scene.
Yeah, I've always connected the two in my mind.
Have you?
I hadn't even thought about the consequences of what happens in the connection to Ishmael. Uh-huh. But I always thought this was some kind of foretelling of that scene that happens later. But I like your idea better.
Okay, cool. So Rand's finger is bleeding because what happens in the dream world happens in the real world. I don't know if you've heard this before, but if you die in the dream, you die in real life too.
And if we keep saying that, by the time we actually get to the place where it keeps happening every chapter, I think everybody will be ready for it.
When they beat us over the head with it in book 3.
Again and again, yeah. In fairness, okay, so it's easy to forget that this was published in 1990 before a movie called The Matrix became a huge, big, center of pop culture. Uh-huh. So this whole idea that your mind makes it real, at least to most people in Western society, mainly America, they weren't exposed to this whole philosophical idea that, what happens in the mind can actually be manifest in the real world. Uh-huh. So what's happening here, it's like he pricks his finger and now he's bleeding. It's kind of a breakthrough. It's cutting edge for its time, is what I'm trying to say.
All right. So we're on the boat. Mm-hmm. And we're told that, after a few days, the shock of the Trolloc attack begins to fade. And so the men kind of start to forget about it and resent Domon for pushing them so hard.
Right.
Until he pulls out the Trolloc weapons that have been left behind. And then that reminds them until the cycle starts all over again. And so that's because it's human nature to adjust. No matter how bad something is, we have a tendency to get used to it, which is important. It's a survival skill. We create this new normal, and it's actually something that we need to be careful about. Like I said, it's important. We need to be able to adjust. That's how we survive.
Right.
We have to adjust or adapt as necessary. But we need to also be careful about what we're adjusting to. And we need to make sure that we're not ultimately adjusting to things that are dangerous for us or bad for us. We can't allow ourselves to normalize or accept things that should not be acceptable. Like, for instance, being attacked by Trollocs or whatever inference you might want to take from that.
Yeah, we need Bayle Domons in our lives to actually,
remind us that this is not okay, people.
Exactly. Take with which that you will.
Yeah.
I like that Thom takes the time to actually try to teach the two boys some of his Gleeman stuff.
Right, like he says, I don't know how to pretend to teach. Either I teach a thing or I don't. So he actually does.
Yeah, and it's going to come in way handy later.
Totally.
But it also demonstrates that Thom is the master of contingency. Mm-hmm. Like, he doesn't just have plan B and C ready to go. He's thinking about E, F, and G down the line.
Right.
Like, he knows these two are going to need to be able to fend for themselves in some way at some point. So if they have some kind of...
useful skills.
that they can just walk into a tavern and do, and they'll have at least a meal and a room for the night.
Right.
These are important skills for these two to have.
Definitely.
So, yay for Thom. Master of contingency.
Exactly. So Florin Gelb is being shunned by the crew.
Yeah.
They blame him for everything. And so they're making him do the dirtiest jobs, and they're avoiding him. And isolation breeds suspicion and hatred and resentment.
Yes, it does.
They flourish and grow in solitude. So both Gelb and Matt are both getting worse the more time they spend alone. Mm-hmm. Gelb's hatred and resentment towards Rand specifically is just growing and growing and growing. But then also so is Matt's paranoia and suspicion. Because he's spending so much time alone, brooding over that stupid dagger.
It's also interesting that Gelb is isolated not by choice, but Matt is, and it's still the same effect.
Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned before that there's a lot in this chapter that pays off later.
Oh, gosh, yes.
So when they're going down the river and they start to see all these cool things, and Bayle Domon, starts talking about the wonders that he's seen, we're introduced very briefly to the Tower of Genji, the Coden Call statue on Tremalking, the idea of the Seafolk Cormor, all the stuff in the Panarch's Palace in Tanchico from the Age of Legends, like the fossils and the bones. There's so much peppered in here that you would never notice on your first read through. But it's so cool when you go back and read it again to see all of these things mentioned.
Yeah, it really is.
Because, some of this stuff, it took a solid decade in real time to come back up.
Yeah.
But they did eventually pay off. So it's really fun to see that it was mentioned all the way back in the first book.
Looking at you, Tower Genji.
Is that fireworks? Sorry, there's a bunch of random noises outside. So hopefully you guys aren't hearing all that stuff. I guess our neighbors decided that it's party time.
I love when Domon says, "It be the strangeness of things that you see that pulls you to the next horizon." It's such a great summary of the romantic nature of adventuring life that we read about in stories. Forget Jack Sparrow's quest for the Black Pearl and the freedom that it supposedly brings. Domon's motivation is so much cooler, at least to me. He kind of reiterates it here later and says, "Things you never dreamed of, in more places than you can see in 10 lifetimes. That be the strangeness that will draw you on."
Yeah, it's very charming, and the way that he talks about adventuring and seeing the world makes me want to go out and adventure.
Yeah, it does. It totally does.
Also, speaking of Jack Sparrow, I can't read Domon's speeches without hearing Jeffrey Rush's voice in my head.
Good old Captain Barbossa.
Because, Jordan wrote them in pirate speak. That's the accent of Ilian.
Yeah, basically.
So, yeah, I hear Barbossa in my head. Thanks, Disney.
Yay.
All right, so 4 days into the journey, we see that Rand is acting high again from the channeling sickness.
Oh, yeah.
So the time between when he channels and then when he feels the effects is getting shorter. If you remember his first time channeling when he refreshes Bella and then he feels the effects in Berlin,
Right.
is like a week to 10 days later.
Yeah, it is.
When he does his antics with the White Cloaks. So now it's down to 4 days. And we'll see that the time between channeling and feeling the effects keeps getting shorter and shorter.
Okay.
So Rand's basically just sitting high on the top of the mast, looking down and laughing like a madman.
Yeah.
For like an hour. Like, he's up there for a while. And people have been trying to get his attention, but he hasn't noticed until Thom has to climb all the way up and tells him that they all think he's gone mad.
Yeah, because, yeah. And then his response is he does this stupid stunt of sliding down the rigging, just like you'd see in a pirate movie. Mm-hmm. He just slides down the rigging and lands as if he, like...
After almost falling.
Yeah, well, he's up there and he almost falls. And then Thom kind of calls him down. And then that's when he decides, I'll do this stunt. And he lands it like a performer and everything. And it's just like, that was stupid.
It was stupid.
And once he snaps out of his sickness, he looks back and says, wait, I did what? That was dumb.
Yeah, he's really shocked and kind of afraid of, like, I could have killed myself. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rand. And then we finally get around to Matt's dagger. We've mentioned it, but here is its official introduction.
Okay.
So this is how the book describes it. A curved dagger with a gold scabbard worked in strange symbols. Fine gold wire wrapped the hilt, which was capped by a ruby as big as Rand's thumbnail, and the quillions were golden scaled serpents bearing their fangs. Obviously, the dagger is already affecting Matt. Not only is he paranoid and suspicious, but he's already protective of the dagger.
Yeah, he is.
Like, listen to his defense when Rand was like, why did you get that from Shire Logoth? What's wrong with you? He says, it's your fault, yours and Perrin's. The two of you pulled me away from the treasure and I had it in my hand. Mordeth didn't give it to me. I took it. So Moraine's warnings about his gifts don't count. You won't tell anybody, Rand. They might try to steal it.
Yeah.
And this is the beginning of Dagger Matt, who is essentially crazy and a huge asshole until he gets healed and then turns into post-healing Matt, who's absolutely the best.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love him. So the only good thing about Dagger Matt is the death of early book Matt, who I just wanted to smack all the time. So I'm going to count this as a win.
Oh, okay. I guess that's a win.
Yeah, like, I mean, if I had to choose, I would definitely choose Dagger Matt over early book Matt, because at least Dagger Matt has an excuse for being awful. Like, he's being poisoned by this dagger. Like, his brain, he doesn't know how terrible he's being, really. He can't help himself.
Oh, okay.
Whereas early book Matt was just terrible for no good reason.
Yeah.
So, honestly, if I had to choose, I'd take Dagger Matt over early book Matt. And also, it just means we're getting closer and closer to post-healing Matt, who's the best. And I can't wait, because that is the great Matt. Like, he's funny and he's cool, and I'm just ready to be there.
I cannot wait till we get there. But we have, like, a whole book and a half left.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thom says that since Rand has such a head for heights, they should travel to Ilion or Ebu Dar because they have people there who will pay a lot of money for a tightrope walker or a wire artist. And Rand says that they're going to Camelin, but Thom just says, sure, today, but tomorrow, who knows? I think, and I could be wrong, I think Thom is 100% certain that he knows Rand can channel. And he's setting Rand up to be able to take the out of not going to Tar Valon so he avoids the Red Oj, and they won't be able to find him. But what do you think?
I'm going to disagree with you here.
Okay.
I think for sure that Thom suspects that one of the boys can channel. I think he's kind of pieced it together that's why Moraine is involved. That's why Myrddraal and Trollocs are after him. Like, I don't think he suspects that one of them is a Dragon Reborn. Okay. But I do think he suspects that one of them can channel. But he doesn't know for sure. And the reason I say that is because later, when Rand catches up with him in Cairhien, when Thom asks him, are there any Aes Sedai with you? And when Rand says no, he's like, Oh, okay. Like, I thought maybe, but if they're not with you, then obviously not. So, okay, well, whatever. So, I mean, I definitely think you're right that he had the suspicion, but I don't think that he knows.
Okay.
That's just my opinion, though.
Tell us what you think.
Yeah, tweet us. Let us know. Pod-Thru. WOTPODTHRU.
And that brings us to the end of Chapter 24. Before we start Chapter 25, here's a quick word from our sponsors.
Today's episode of the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru is brought to you by Thom Maryland, Gleeman for Hire. No matter if you're simply planning an excellent Beltane, or if you need to murder a king or have a mutiny on your hands, Thom Maryland is a Gleeman for you. Juggling, stories, songs, political intrigue, and knife skills. He's the complete package, no matter your entertainment needs. Thom Maryland, Gleeman, and more.
Chapter 25 is called The Traveling People, and the icon is the leaf.
Perrin, Egwene, and Bella are traveling with Elias and the wolves, and a happy party they are not. Elias is creepy, Perrin is broody, Egwene is bossy, and Bella is a horse. So the wolves are freaking her out. But she's the creator, so she's fine.
Yes.
She's fine.
Absolutely.
She's fine. Perrin is growing more aware of the wolves every day, but stubbornly denying it to himself. He hasn't had a Bayle Domon dream since joining the wolves, but his dreams do have a new addition, a wolf bodyguard. After 3 days, they come across a band of TEOTW, or the traveling people, sometimes referred to as tinkers. Egwene wants to avoid them because of the rumors she's heard of them for being thieves and kidnappers and the like. Elias mocks her ignorance and informs her that the rumors have been greatly exaggerated. Still, he is reluctant to visit them. Perrin, however, is excited and convinces Elias to stay the night with them. The TEOTW are initially a little wary of the newcomers, but once their leader, Rand, goes through the ritual of greeting and welcomes them, the others see that there's no threat and return to their peaceful, colorful lives. Rand asks if they know the song, and Elias tells them they do not. Elias explains to Perrin and Egwene that the traveling people search for the song, which they lost during the breaking of the world, and if they can find it again, the paradise of the Age of Legends will return. They meet Rand's wife, Ela, and their grandson, Aram, and learn about the Way of the Leaf, the basic philosophy of the traveling people. They have a debate about the practicality of being pacifists, and Aram sets Perrin on edge. Perrin gets in a couple sick burns until Aram flounces off with Egwene, to whom he has shown great interest. Rand tells Elias about a story that has been passing among the bands of traveling people, about a group of ale maidens of the spear. They were all dead but one, who was desperate to pass along a message, even to a people group she visibly hated. Rand delivers the message and admits that he doesn't understand it. Elias is also confused and has to admit that it makes no sense to him either. After a confusing exchange with Egwene, Perrin heads to bed, where the wolves are waiting for him in his dreams.
Another big chapter with a lot of things that happen.
Yeah, lots of stuff. So to me, it is completely obvious that Elias has no interest in Egwene whatsoever. She's just like an appendage to Perrin as far as Elias is concerned. And he intimidates the hell out of her.
Well, yeah.
Crazy wolf man, you know.
I mean, it makes sense. He's said multiple times that he does not like people. And the only reason he's even interacting with them is that the wolves say that Perrin can talk to wolves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he's a wolf brother. Egwene's not included in that. So, yeah, unfortunately. And to kind of highlight, Egwene tries to get Elias to take a turn on Bella.
Right.
And it does not go well.
No, it doesn't.
But it got me thinking this time around, like, it hit me that I know I don't like Egwene, and she's always seems argumentative and just very off-putting. But maybe part of the reason she's so combative and she's
bossy.
So bossy here is she's trying to emulate her mentor, who's Nynaeve, and failing at it horribly because for different reasons. Do you think that I'm off base here? Do you think that could be a justification for her behavior, or am I just trying to make sense of something that just bugs me?
I definitely think it's possible, because we know that Nynaeve, she's a prickly pear,
Yeah, she can be.
Is domineering and she comes off as angry a lot. So it could be that Egwene is trying to imitate her or emulate her. But the thing with Nynaeve is that she has genuine authority. So when she comes in laying down the law and saying what's what, she does so with that authority behind her. And Egwene doesn't have that. So if she is trying to imitate Nynaeve, she's failing. And she just comes off as bossy and a know-it-all and like you were saying, argumentative. But, I mean, when you think about it, Egwene doesn't have very many role models. I mean, there were some great women in the village, but they all live pretty small lives, and these aren't the type of lives that Egwene wants to lead. So when it comes to strong, successful women who aren't doing the live in a small village, get married, and have children, really the only role models she has are Nynaeve and Moraine. You know, and Moraine's not, you know, an anger ball like Nynaeve is, but she's also
prickly,
not very nice.
Yeah.
She's, you know, she comes in and she lays down the law and she's very commanding and she brooks no nonsense. So it makes sense that Egwene trying to figure out how strong, successful women act. It does make sense that she's
flailing a bit,
yeah, and not quite knowing how to act, just knowing that she's supposed to act in charge.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, it's frustrating, but it does sort of make sense that she hasn't figured it out yet. So I don't think you're off base.
Yay! But you're not going to say I'm right either. Ha!
Sure, you're totally right, 100% all the time.
Yay! Wait, what? Okay. It's very cool that Perrin is already starting to sense what the wolves are communicating with each other. Mm-hmm. Like, Dapple sends the rest of the pack back to their normal territory and hunting grounds while she stays with the three of them. And Perrin knows this because he basically overhears Dapple tell the pack to go home. Mm-hmm. I like this transition into his ability. It's natural, it's intuitive for Perrin,
right?
And it happens unconsciously.
Yeah,
and it's absolutely frustrating that he does not appreciate it.
I know, very true. I mean, we talked about this in the last episode, but it's very, very, very cool power, and Perrin is wasting it.
If I was able to communicate with my cat or with other animals, like I would think that's pretty dang cool. But yeah, whatever.
Absolutely, I need a kitty thought translator. Stat. So before they come across the traveling people, they're confronted by 3 giant mastiffs, and Elias does this like dog whisper thing on them,
like that guy from that show.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that the wolves look down on these massive dogs. Mm-hmm. They
have contempt for these dogs.
It's true, utter contempt, because these dogs have chosen to exchange the life of freedom that the wolves have to run in a pack and hunt and all that other stuff for the security of the fire by the men. Like, they chose to live with the 2 legs next to the fires. Mm-hmm. And they've chosen that security instead of freedom. And what I find interesting about that is that there is so much judging happening all over the place in this chapter. And the wolves are also part of that judging.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of judging, Egwene shows how backwater she is here. She automatically spouts the prejudice she was raised with against the traveling people. And Elias quickly points out how ridiculous she is. Mm-hmm. So the last time we saw Egwene and Perrin, she was all over Perrin's stubborn prejudice against Aes Sedai because she herself wants to be an Aes Sedai, and she's capable of seeing them complexly. But when it comes to the Tuatha An, she still has that bias she was raised with, and she doesn't even question it.
Nope.
And then Perrin, on the other hand, is so interested in the tinker's ability to mend pots and work metal and stuff that he doesn't care about their reputation. He's interested in seeing how they do it.
Right. So Perrin's description of the traveling people is kind of cool. Like, what he says is they looked like butterflies in a field of wildflowers.
Right.
So they wear extremely colorful clothing, and they paint their wagons in colorful designs, and it's like an assault on your eyes. It's hard not to be charmed by the culture of the traveling people.
I think so.
It's just really hard not to love them.
Yeah. They're so colorful and peaceful, and they're always singing and dancing and telling stories, and it's really a lovely culture.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Let's put the cultural appropriation argument to the side for a moment, because I honestly don't know how the Wheel of Time falls into that argument. And if you have thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Please email us at wadpodthru@gmail.com and let us know your opinions on how you think Robert Jordan dealt with culture, and if you think that cultural appropriation is a thing here. Just let us know what you think. So let's put that aside for a second, because I honestly don't know how I feel. I am going to say that I think Robert Jordan does a pretty good job at creating cultures. Certainly that they're a mishmash of real cultures.
Right.
So none of the cultures in the Wheel of Time are one-to-one parallels of the real world. But the traveling people are probably the closest. They are definitely clearly reminiscent of the Irish travelers and of Romani people.
Yes, they are.
And so all of the prejudice and the mistreatment and suspicion and all the stuff that the village-bound people say and think about the Tuatha is very real. The Romani people and the Irish travelers have a long history of being hated and discriminated against that's been well documented.
Right.
So Egwene's prejudice is obvious, overt racism. But Perrin isn't much better.
How so? Can you unpack that for me a bit?
Perrin thinks that the tasks he sees them doing are disappointingly everyday, like cooking and sewing and tending to children and mending harnesses. He has exoticized these people, romanticizing them or glamorizing their lives so much that he views them as other.
Okay.
So even though he wasn't ill-meaning, he has essentially dehumanized them. So when he sees that they're just normal people, there's a certain amount of disappointment. This is not the freak show he was hoping to see.
Right.
So it's like when white men fetishize women of color. It's still a form of racism, though not as obvious as like what we see from Egwene.
Right.
So it's still ultimately damaging.
And completely unmeaning.
Yeah, like he is happy to see the traveling people. Mm-hmm. He was excited, he's heard all these stories and he wants a look. But he's not necessarily coming at them with respect. He's coming at them because this is something different that he wants to observe and make a show out of.
Got it. Okay.
That's why it's damaging. He's not seeing them as people. He's seeing them as a spectacle.
Okay, I can see that point. I can see where you're coming from on that. And I agree with you that that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's absolutely wrong to do.
Not as bad as Egwene, but it's still problematic.
It's something that we need to think about.
Subtle, kind of microaggressions and subconscious racism that I think we need to pay attention to. Because I think in this day and age, we all know that racism is a bad thing.
Right.
And overt racism, is easy to recognize. But these subtleties are a lot harder to identify. Yes, and so I think it's important to pay attention to them when they happen so that we can more easily rectify or recognize them in the future.
Right. Okay. I'm with you.
Yay.
So the exchange that happens between Rain and Elias, the ritual of greeting that the Tuatha have, it's kind of beautiful. There's just something about rituals that are both formal and simple that just kind of carry a sense of weight and importance. Mm-hmm. Like the traveling people are seeking the song.
Right.
And they will seek it every place they roam. The greeting that they have, they greet people with the ceremony, and they're kind of inviting them in to assist them in that search, in that quest. So visitors are invited first to join them in their most important quest before they even are invited to share a table. And I find a beauty in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like the formality of it is an interesting juxtaposition with their casual, informal, itinerant
Everyday
lifestyles.
life, yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I really like their ceremonies.
So the song that the people are searching for it's the same song that LTT asks Ishmael about way back in the prologue. It seems so long ago. Right?
Okay.
I always thought it was.
So technically speaking, the song that they seek is the growing song. So yes, in the prologue, when LTT asks Ishmael about, do you have the voice? What he's referring to, and we see this in more depth when Rand goes through the thing in Rudian and sees the history of the Ale. Certain humans had this talent called the voice, and they would join with Ogier tree singers and what's the race of green men? Is it the Nim?
The Nim.
Okay, so they would join with the Ogiers and the Nim, and it was a growing song. It
Actually
helped
made
things grow. Yeah, and that is technically the song originally that the
Was
traveling
lost.
people were looking for. That's the song that was lost. But at this point, I mean, it's been 3,000 years. At this point, that like real song has morphed, and now when they're searching for the song, what they're really searching for is an ideal. They're searching for the peace and utopia of the Age of Legends.
Okay.
So, like Elias explains, that their mythology is that if they ever find the song, then the piece of the Age of Legends will come back. So the tragic part is that they're never actually going to find the song because it's something that can't be recaptured.
Right.
Like that will never happen. So in a way, the song's not only an ideology, but it's also sort of a justification for their lifestyle.
Right.
Because if you believe that it's possible to recapture ultimate peace and utopia, then being a pacifist, like following the way of Leaf to the extreme that they do, makes sense. But if you accept that that's not possible, and that because of human nature, you will never get to a point of peace and utopia ever again, then it doesn't make any sense to follow the way of the Leaf.
That makes sense.
So that's what I think the song is.
Okay. So they're looking for an idea.
Yeah, an ideal that they can't actually ever achieve. Which is sad.
Which is very sad. And talking about sad, I get why Elias won't say that he's friends with Rain.
Okay.
And Elias does not respect their chosen lifestyle, the way of the Leaf.
Mm-hmm.
But he knows that they are kind people and that they have good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
But he does not suffer fools lightly at all. And he sees this adherence to the way of the Leaf of absolute pacifism as complete foolishness.
Yeah. Yeah. Rain is a good man.
Yes, he is.
And I like him very much. But yeah, Elias, they aren't friends. No. And Ela does not like Elias.
No.
She has a hard time not being hostile. Like, way of the Leaf be damned.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and knowing what's going to transpire with Rain and Ilya and over the course of the next few books, really, this Perrin's introduction to them is so bittersweet. Like, these are really good people, and they're going to go through a lot of hardship. And
yeah,
Perrin isn't just going to be a witness to see it. He's going to be part of that hardship.
And sometimes the cause of it.
Yes, he will be.
Yeah.
And speaking of horrible things, we meet Aram for the first time, who I just want to punch in the face.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I hated Aram from his first introduction, and no matter how much he changed throughout the series, I never grew to like him.
Yeah.
And, then, of course, he turns into a freaking sociopath,
Well,
so there's that.
Yeah.
But here at the beginning, he's such a douchebag player and way more confident than he has any right to be.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about the way of the leaf. We should probably describe it.
Oh,
so I'm just going to quote. I'm going to quote. The way of the leaf, Egwene said, "What is that?" Aram gestured to the trees, his eyes fastened intently on hers. The leaf lives its appointed time and does not struggle against the wind that carries it away. The leaf does no harm and finally falls to nourish new leaves. So it should be with all men and women. Egwene stared back at him, a faint blush rising in her cheeks. "But what does that mean?" Perrin said. Aram gave him an irritated glance, but it was Rain who answered. "It means that no man should harm another for any reason whatsoever." The Seeker's eyes flickered to Elias. "There's no excuse for violence. None. Not ever."
Okay, so Perrin's response to Aram's dogmatic recital of the summary of what the way of the leaf is, it kind of warms my heart.
Oh, yeah.
The older I get, the more I find myself saying things like, "That sounds really cool, but what does it actually mean?" Ultimately, we will see Aram's belief in the way is so built on ideas that he has not taken ownership of that he'll abandon it.
Yeah.
If we don't question what we believe, and if we settle for easy answers or the party line for tough questions, what we believe is likely not to have a solid foundation to stand on. Happiness may not come from finding the answers to the questions that Perrin has about the way, but neither will it come from Aram's blind adherence to the way. Whereas Rand's answers are what have come from he's come to understand through a life of sacrifice and consideration and thought and mulling over. And therefore, he has an ownership of his beliefs that Aram will never have, and also a monochrome of peace and happiness that Aram will never have. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So they go back and forth about the practicality of the way of the leaf. And then we get this gem from Perrin. "Some people," Aram said with a heavy sadness, "can never overcome their baser instincts." He said it with a look at Perrin that made it clear he was not talking about the bullies Perrin spoke of. "I'll bet you get to run away a lot," Perrin said, and the young tinker's face tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the way of the leaf.
Burn!
So good. So happy.
Awesome. That was great.
So should we talk about what we think of the way of the leaf?
Sure. Want me to go first?
Yeah.
So, I've already said, I think this whole idea of the way of the leaf is beautiful. I love the imagery, and I love just the sentiment of, basically it's, don't mess with other people. Just be who you are and do what you're supposed to do.
Don't start nothing, there won't be none.
Exactly. Well, not exactly. That's dumb. But so I encountered extreme pacifism as a concept for the first time when I was in college. And like most college people, you get exposed to something, you're like, "Oh, this is totally the way it should be." But I also ran into the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer around the same time. And for those of you who don't know, the very quick history of that is Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Jew who lived during World War II. He saw the rise of Hitler coming to power. And prior to that, he was a pacifist. He did not believe there should be war. He did not believe the Nazis or anybody should be stopped. He did not believe that the fighting would solve anything. It would just lead to more fighting, which makes sense because World War II happened because World War I. Go check the history books and you'll see what I mean. But he also saw the rise of the Nazis. and he saw the horrible atrocities that were being committed, and had to come to a decision in his life not just to renounce his pacifism. He didn't just say, okay, well, yeah, maybe we need to fight. No. He took personal, he participated in one of the almost successful assassination attempts of Hitler. And almost worked. And he was one of the forefront people in the movement and in that whole plan and design. So he went from being completely pacifist to being willing to take someone's life, specifically because there was a reason that it needed to happen. And that's always kind of like, since I've run into that, I've pretty much assimilated that into my own. Like there is a time for peace. There is a time to maintain peace. But there is also a time when lines are crossed that you have to take evil and make it go away. And pacifism will not get you there.
Right.
Otherwise, no one will.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think I agree with that. Like, I believe in pacifism. I want very much to be a pacifist. And I think, you know, for most of my life, I would say that I'm a pacifist. I don't really believe in guns. I don't really like war. But at the same time, I do recognize that sometimes it is necessary. Sometimes there are evils that are so great that you have to fight them.
Yes.
I very much believed in Dr. King's message of passive resistance, peaceful resistance. But at the same time, I also totally recognize the validity of the Black Panther Party that was like, we're being gunned down, and the only way to stop that is to get guns ourselves.
Right. Right.
You know, like, sometimes the only way to stop violence is to meet it with violence. And I recognize that that's reality because humans suck. And it's human nature to take advantage and try to grab power and to abuse people. And that's the reality of the world that we live in. And I agree with the aspect of the way of the leaf where if you do harm to others, you also do harm to yourself.
Right.
I mean, we've already talked in this podcast about like soldiers who go off to war and have to kill people or fight with people and that
come back very
permanently
changed.
changes them. But at the same time, some of those wars, not all of them, but some of those wars were absolutely necessary, and those men are heroes.
Right.
You know, like, I mean, I want very much to live in a society where violence is not necessary. I want very much to, like the traveling people, I want that utopia, that peaceful place where you can go about the world believing in peace and doing no harm. But I live in this world. Right, and that's basically what Perrin comes up against it. I mean, he also loves the idea of ultimate peace, but he's seen Trollocs, and he's seen Myrtle, and he's seen just shitty people. Yeah. And, you know, he's like, if a Trolloc is coming against you, you can't talk your way out of that. Right. And sometimes you can't run away. So what are you going to do? Just sit there and let them kill you? Like, that's stupid and wasteful.
Yes.
And we'll see that Perrin actually gets really angry at the Way of the Leaf because he sees this play out. You know, he sees the Tuatha get attacked multiple times. And they do nothing to raise a hand to stop it.
Nope.
And it's such a waste, and it just pisses him off. And I can really identify with that because waste also makes me angry.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I really understand Perrin's perspective of this is a beautiful, beautiful dream. And I hope someday it comes true, and I wish that it was true today, but it's not. And you have to live in reality. And reality says sometimes, even if it does do damage to you, you still have to fight.
Yeah.
Some fights are worth fighting for. You know, some things you just have to stop because the evil is too great.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is unfortunate. So we learn that the traveling people call those who have turned their backs on the way of the leaf lost ones.
Yes.
Ela says that the lost ones cannot be happy. So when Rain is recounting the Ale story,
Right.
he says, "She called us lost. I never knew before how much they loathe us." Somehow they don't see the corollary there. Like, they would never say that they loathe the lost ones who've turned their back on the way. But
the traveling people, you mean?
Yeah. The traveling people. Like, they would just say that they pity them. You know,
Right.
they're sad for their loss. But immediately, Rain says that the Ale loathed them by calling them lost. And I just thought that was really, really ironic, because it's the same terminology, and even though they don't know this yet, it comes from the same place. But I mean, he has this extremely strong reaction to the term lost ones, even though they use that term themselves.
Well, I think what's going on here is I don't think Rain understands that he's lying to himself when he says, you know, when he thinks that they see these lost ones as, you know, it's unfortunate, but we don't hate them. Mm-hmm. But unpacking that a little bit, we're going to see later on, and maybe we can talk about it in detail later, but we're going to see Aram's going to make the choice to leave the way to leave. Mm-hmm. And I've seen this happen in churches and in various different communities that I've been involved in. When someone decides to leave the community, like, they cut themselves off from family, they cut themselves off from the community, they cut themselves off from very intimate relationships. And the people who they've turned their back on, it's not just a shunning that happens, it's a grieving that happens.
It's like they're dead to them.
And yes, absolutely, there's anger, and there is resentment, and there is, you know, in some cases, malice. I mean, the people who are in a tight community who lose somebody may say, well, it's their choice. They can leave anytime they want. But not really. I mean, in especially a society like this, living in this traveling band, Aaron has responsibilities. He has things that he does for that band that he's a member of. He is contributing to, and his loss hurts the whole community. So so it's when they hear someone else call them lost ones, that could be why all of a sudden think, how could you hate us like that? Because they actually...
Like, it's so triggering?
It's a trigger. Like, they know they have had friends who have lost children who have decided to walk away. They've had friends who have walked away. They've had people in their lives who have walked away. So it is a bit of a slap in the face when they get called lost ones, because they know what it means to be a lost one and how it hurts the people around them. That could be what...
Okay.
And again, I have a tendency to overread things and overthink things and overjustify things. I 100% admit that, but the math on that kind of works out for me.
Okay. So we should talk about the Ale story.
Yes, we should, please.
We get a lot of information about the Ale, but this episode is already running kind of long, so I'm gonna say let's save most of it
for when we actually...
We have plenty of opportunity to speak about the Ale. They will come up a lot. So let's just kind of put a pin on that, and we'll talk about it the next time they come up.
Okay.
So here is
the important part.
What the maiden said to that band of Tuathon. She sees the seeker of that band by his coat, and this is what she said, word for word. Leaf blighter means to blind the eye of the world, lost one. He means to slay the great serpent. Warn the people, lost one. Sightburner comes. Tell them to stand ready for he who comes with the dawn. Tell them, and then she died.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in there.
So much.
Yeah. So, okay, leaf blighter and sightburner are Ale terms for the dark one.
Yeah.
And it's probably the easiest.
We'll unpack those terms later because they are loaded, but those are the dark one, yeah.
Yeah. So he means to slay the great serpent. So we talked about you talked about this in the previous chapter,
right?
In Rand's dream, when Ishamon. Yeah, let's go Ishamon.
There we go. Ishamon. Yeah, there we go.
When Ishamon says, Jesus, I'll strangle you with the corpse of the great serpent. That he's talking about ending time, basically stopping time.
Right. And I don't know if we've said it explicitly yet in the show, but stopping time means unraveling the fabric of the universe.
Right.
Everything ceases to exist.
Right.
If time doesn't move on, nothing exists. So that's a bad thing.
It is. It's bad. Yeah. And then we also get a reference to the Eye of the World. Now, we've also heard of the Eye of the World from Ishamon. New term. That he said the Eye of the World won't serve you.
Right.
But we don't really at this point know what the Eye of the World is in the book. Do you want to try to unpack that?
Unfortunately, it's one of those things that is very, very vague until you get to the very end of the book.
Yeah.
So the Eye
and even so, even after the end, it's still a little vague, to be honest.
Yeah. So the Eye of the World is a place.
Or is it the well of power itself? Because I thought that was the Eye of the World.
It depends on who you talk to in the fan community.
Okay.
So the Eye of the World can either refer to the place that this huge stored up well of pure Sedin, the male half of the source that has not been touched by the Dark One's power.
Right.
It's this pool of it that's been stored and sealed away and kept
protected.
Safe.
Yeah.
Waiting for the Dragon Reborn. So you can either refer to the Eye of the World as the place or the actual well of power that's there.
So when it says leaf blighter means to blind the Eye of the World, what does that mean, practically speaking?
I think
taint it?
Yes, I think that's exactly what it means. Like either make sure it's destroyed, like with the access to it is destroyed, or go through and taint it so that it can't be used without driving the dragon insane.
Right.
That's what I think. I could be wrong.
That's possible.
Yeah. So
it's book one.
Right.
So these, dreams and portents and prophecies are a little vague.
Right. And I think it kind of comes back to what we were talking about in the first couple episodes of maybe this wasn't really intended to be a prophecy that we see fulfilled 100%. This could be one of those writing devices where Robert Jordan is throwing words at us and throwing concepts at us way ahead of when we're actually going to encounter them, so that we have the verbiage already in the back of our minds and it doesn't seem as foreign later. We kind of, we've talked about this before, instead of like, what is this thing? I've never encountered it before. That could be one of the things going on here.
Maybe. It's possible. Basically, though, the gist of the message is shit's about to get real, y'all.
In a really bad way.
Exactly. And, that's basically it, except that Perrin is kind of an overprotective jerk to Egwene, but we can save that for next time because it'll be worse next time. So we'll talk about it then.
And that brings us to the end of chapters 24 and 25 of Our World. Join us next week. We will discuss chapters 26, 27, and 28. One of our rare 3-chapter episodes.
Ooh. We hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru.
We'll see you again next week. Make sure you rate and subscribe to us on iTunes or Twitter or Spotify, or you can do that now. Or
Google Play,
Google Podcasts, all that fun stuff. We are in as many places as we possibly can now. So come and subscribe, rate us, and it's important to do that because we show up in the related podcasts and all that other fun stuff, and it just helps more people find us and join the show.
We also want to hear from you, so tweet at us or send us emails because we really enjoy the interaction.
Yeah, we do. We've got a lot of great emails the last couple of weeks. We're going to try to give people shout outs. We got some great shout outs from Sweden. Thank you so much.
Learn some things.
Learn some things that we'll be sharing in later episodes. So thanks a lot for that. Find us at Pod-Thru on Twitter or whatpodthru@gmail.com.
That's WOTPODTHRU. Thanks, everybody. We hope the wheel weaves you in our direction again soon.